Hello, good people. Welcome once again to my channel where I try to bring to you Oracle-related content for your personal and professional development. And if you continue to find content like this helpful, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share with your friends. Today we are starting a multi-part series. This has been a request from a lot of people I know. On how to configure and install a RAC database in our Oracle VirtualBox. And more than likely, this video is going to be a 5-part series. So for today, our first video, we would prepare a virtual Oracle Linux 7 server with 3 network interfaces. Subsequent videos, we would clone that VM and do some configurations on the hostname and network settings, and enable SSH between these 2 nodes so that they should be able to talk to each other for communication. And then we will provision launch for ASM configuration, and then eventually install Oracle Grid Infrastructure 12C. And that will be the release 2. And then for our final video, then we would deploy Oracle database software 12C release 2 and install a RAC database. And then subsequent videos, of course, would show how we can certainly do several different things with our Oracle, our newly installed Oracle RAC database. So that is the plan for now. And in this first video, as we are going to be installing Oracle Linux 7 server, for those of you who have been following my videos, there is a video I have, and I would see if I can put the link up here. For you guys to click to see how we can just, go ahead and install a regular Oracle Linux server. The difference with this one is it would have 3 network interfaces. Now, highlighted are the different softwares that you need to download from the Oracle eDelivery website. For the Linux image, it is the V834394 01 ISO image. And for the database softwares, it is going to be the V38996001 zip file, which is the 12.2 database software, and the V840012-01, which is the grid infrastructure for 12C release 2. So for our VM setup, we are going to configure today an Oracle Linux virtual server that has 3 network interfaces. We're going to assign the host-only adapter to the first one, the internal network adapter to the second one, and we are going to use a bridge adapter for the third network interface. Requirements, I set minimum 16 gig RAM, and that is because we plan on allocating 6 gigs to each server, so that, with a multiple of 2, that makes it 12 gig. And these are resource intensive servers. So you should have at least 4 gig left for your operating system and other programs running on your laptop or desktop to be able to function. I just prepped here some of the network interfaces. So the public IP, we would assign, at least for node 1, we would assign this on creation of the VM. When we are done creating that virtual server, we are going to clone it and then, of course, make some configuration changes on the host name and the IP addresses. So we are going to allocate, at least the public IP for the first one. And we would see how this continues to move further. So without much more discussion, let's go ahead and get this project started. So I'll make this a little bit bigger. So we would go to file machine, and then we would create a new virtual machine. And I would give it a name, RAC node 1. So this is already in preparation for our RAC installation. It is going to be a Linux, an Oracle Linux 64-bit by default. And I said I was going to allocate 6 gig of memory. I would create a virtual hard disk. I'll just leave those defaults and then dynamically allocate. Initially, I would give this 50. Now, in my previous videos, I gave it 100 I'm giving this 50 because we are going to be using ASM disks, and we are going to be able to allocate those and use those for the data files to be stored on. So I don't need to put more space than I need on the servers themselves. So this space is enough to host the installation of the grid infrastructure as well as the database software. All right, so that has been created. Now, fair enough, we're going to do some settings here. Right click and do settings, or if you like, you can just go ahead and click on settings right here. Now, for the general tab, under advanced, of course, I always like enabling my bi-directional, so that at the end of it all, we are able to copy paste between our server and our local system. In the description, I might just say RAC nodes on Oracle Linux 7, just to give you perspective. All right, so under system, we already allocated 6 gig. I usually like taking up the floppy. But for my pointing device, I wouldn't use the PS2 mouse. I would use any of the USB tablet or USB multi-touch tablet. That way it keeps the mouse more user-friendly during the process of the Oracle Linux installation. In terms of processors, I would give this 2 CPUs. I think that's all I'm going to do at this point. Display, I wouldn't make any changes. Now, in terms of storage, I would have at this point to locate the bootable image, the Linux bootable image. So I would click on empty, and right here, I would click on this blue disk-like looking thing, and I would choose a disk file. Now I have that saved on my D drive. I have a folder called my RAC project, and I have my Oracle Linux 7 ISO. Now I renamed it for convenience. Now remember, if you are doing this, you more than likely will see this disk ISO image, and you would have to locate that from the location to which you downloaded it. So I just wanted to be mindful of that. I renamed it just for convenience. So I would choose that, and that would be my bootable image. In terms of audio, no change. Network, this is where it becomes important for us, right? Remember that we said we would use, for host adapter number 1, we would use the host only. For the second one, we would do internal network, and I would name that private network. And then for the third adapter, I would use my bridge. So let's go ahead and do that. Network adapter, I would choose the first one as host only. And if you haven't configured a host only adapter yet on your Linux virtual system, again, the video I referenced to earlier, please go through that, and you would see how to do that. So adapter 2, I would say private internal network, and it defaults to private network. So the internal network defaults to the private network, so we'll leave it at that. And for the third adapter, I would engage my bridge. So this helps me, intercommunication between the VM and the web. So I would leave it at that. So those are the only changes. So network adapter number 1, host only, adapter number 2, internal, and adapter number 3, bridged adapter. I'm not going to make any changes on the serial ports, no changes to the USB, no changes to the shared drives, at least at this time. And if we need to do that, I will let you know. And the user interface, I'm not going to make any changes. So everything looks kind of nice and good right now. Let's go ahead and hit OK. And then let's launch our installation of the server. Let's click on the green button where it says start, and let's start the installation of that server. Just give it a minute. And if for your display, it comes as small as this, I just go to view and I choose the virtual screen, and I probably auto scale it. Here it auto scales to 200. Now, when your installation starts, or I can even auto scale it to something bigger than 200, maybe 225. Once your installation starts, you have 60 seconds to make a choice. It usually defaults to test this media and install Oracle Linux 7. I don't want to run a test on this media. So I would use my up arrow key and just go to install Oracle Linux 7 media. I hit enter, and I would start my installation process. Okay, let's do that. Start installer. Okay, so this, we are going to follow the graphical user interface to kind of help us with our installation. So English is what I would choose. I hit next, continue. And on continue now, there are some things I will have to choose here as options. I am very picky on my date and time. I am on US Central Time. So I probably should choose a city. I'll just click in here and choose a city. Winnipeg, I think this should be Central Time right now because the time shows the same time on my computer. So it doesn't matter, you can scroll down and choose any city. I know for sure, like a city like Chicago is also on Central Time. Choose whatever time works for your time zone. It really doesn't matter. I would hit done when I'm completed with this. Keyboard, I'm not going to make any change because it's US English. Language support is United States that we did. So in software, the installation, I would go with software selection. And what I'm trying to install here is a server with a graphical user interface, server with GUI. And again, if you watch my previous video, I'm not going to be picky about the options that I choose. I select everything just to make sure that every option that I need is installed. I would scroll down and make sure I pick everything that I need. Compatibility library is very important. So all the options, I just scroll back to make sure that all the options have been selected, and I click on done. Now it's going to do some dependencies, and there we go. It should be coming up here. So it says the installation source is not yet set up. So let's go ahead and click on our system. And when we are within the installation destination, this already has been featured as our installation destination. So we're going to be using the virtual hard disk that we created as our installation destination. So no changes to this one. I would hit OK. But if for some reason you advertently click on it, you just want to click back and make sure you have the black circle with the white checkbox, and then you validate that. So very important at this point, we have to do our host name settings. Let's go ahead and check on that. So remember, when we were allocating the network adapters, we had 3 interfaces. And these 3 interfaces, remember, we said the first interface was our host only. And that is going to be what we would use on this one. So ENP0S3 is our host only. But before we start making configuration changes on the network, why don't we go ahead and make a change to our host name? We gave this RAC node 1. I would leave this on local domain, but I would change the name to RAC node 1.local domain. Let's apply that. And our current host name now has changed to RAC node 1 at local domain. Now, I would make some configuration changes to this. So I would highlight, you can highlight on each one of them and make the change. So ENP0S3, I would go to configure. And when it comes up, I would make sure that under the first tab, general, I want to automatically connect to this network when it is available. and I would go ahead and change the IPv4 settings and change it to manual because I want to assign it a static IP. And then I would click on add. And for that static IP, I would use for the 192.168.56, and that would be .111. It would stay on a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. And for the gateway, I can leave it at that, or I can do a 0.0.0.0. I wouldn't put any DNS servers in here. I will require IPv4 addressing for this connection to complete. If that is okay, I would click on save. Now, for ENPS2, I would do something. Let's make sure that this is already on. That's good. For ENPS2, this would also be kind of on the same subnet mask as this. So for ENP0S8, this interface, remember, we allocated our internal network to this interface. So we would have to put this in its own subnet. So I would go ahead and configure this. Always, general, you want to make sure that you automatically connect to this when it is available. And under the IPv4 settings, I would go ahead and choose manual and add a set of IPs to it. Remember the IP addresses we were looking at for the internal net, we would use the 101 rather than the 56. So that is kind of where the difference is. So 192.168.10.101. And I would put it still in the same subnet mask, .0, and then of course, same thing, .0.0.0. And then I would require IPv4 for that, and then I would save it. Now, ENPOS 0S3, 0S9 would be our bridge. I wouldn't make any changes to the bridge. All I would do is just require it to automatically connect to this network when it's available. For IPv4 settings, I would just leave it as on DHCP. And then I would save that. Okay, so our network configurations are done, and I would go ahead and validate that. So just as a summary, date is done, keyboard, we are not making any change, language support, installations, software selection, installation destination. KDump is enabled. I don't want KDump. I would uncheck KDump. So I would validate that. And there is no security profile that needs to be chosen. So I would just leave that alone, and then I would begin my installation. When I begin installation, I would have to pause the video after creating the root and admin credentials in the interest of time. So let's begin installation. It's going to ask for us to change the root password. We click on that. For my VMs, I use the Oracle password. It doesn't like that. It says the password is weak, so I will have to click on this done twice. I click the first time, it's going to ask again, and I do that. I would create a user. If I don't do that now, it's still going to have me create that. I always create the user admin, and the username is admin. I would not make this user the administrator. I would use the same password, Oracle. I hit done twice. And at this point, all we have to do is wait for the installation to complete. I would pause the video and resume the video at the end of the installation, and we would review our licensing and then make some post installation changes and test our VM for connectivity. And if all of that checks off, we would proceed with our plan. All right, good people. Here we are. So when your installation completes, you will get to the screen where it is requesting you to reboot. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's click on reboot. And then we wait for our VM to reboot, our server to reboot. We're going to accept the licensing agreement, and then we would see certainly if our server is working as planned. So let's just give it some time. All right, at this point, it's going to ask us here to confirm our licensing agreement. So we're going to click on that. All right, here we go. If you want to go ahead and read the license, you can scroll all the way down, but we're just going to check our licensing agreement and click on done. We can close this here on the right side. And once that is done, we want to make sure our network and host name and everything is connected. And we click on finish configuration. So at this point, usually if you're familiar with working with the Oracle VirtualBox, the root user is hardly ever listed up here. So we would click on not listed and then type root, hit enter, and then for password, we do Oracle, and then we hit enter. Our initial setup screen is going to come on. We just validate what we see here. English, that's true. United States English, that's true. We're going to skip this. And our Linux server, it's okay to be used. Now, if this screen pops up, you could just go ahead and click on the X button right here. Now, first of all, I want to open up a terminal. So I can do that in one of two ways. I can go under applications, and under the favorites, there is a terminal icon here. I can click on that. If I right click within the desktop, it has an option for open terminal. So let's go ahead and click on that. Now, one of the things I want to check, first of all, is do I even have connectivity with the internet? So I would send a ping. I use the -C for Linux because it just keeps pinging until you stop it. I would send 5 packets to Yahoo or Google.com. So that actually looks pretty good. 5 packets sent, 5 packets received, no packet lost, which means we are able to connect. Now, before I proceed, at this point, your virtual machine is not very friendly. You are not able to, click out, click in, and all of that stuff. So what we would do is I would go on devices and I will insert the guest additions image. That is automatically going to pop up a run template. I'll click on run, and then I will let this do its thing in the back. While this is working, right here, I still do have my terminals. There are some post settings that I need to do. One of the first is with SE Linux. Remember, we talked about secure Linux, right? Currently, we have to set it to either permissive or disable in order for our VirtualBox to work the way we want. And the way we do that is we are going to edit a certain file called the etc SE Linux, and there is a config file. So we are going to use the Vim editor to edit that. And while in there, it's currently set to enforcing. So I would use the I arrow on my keyboard to switch to insert mode. So I would go ahead and take this all the way to the end, backspace to delete, and then I would set it to permissive. And then I would save that. WQ, enter. Now, the second thing I need to do, and let me just check if the VirtualBox is already working. So press return to close this window. So our VirtualBox additions is completed. So I would go ahead and hit enter and close that. The next thing I would want to do is the firewall setting. So if this is to be used for an Oracle installation, we need to disable or configure the local firewall. But for what I want to do is I would use the systemctl command to stop firewall, and the daemon is firewall D. So I would stop the firewall daemon, and then I would go ahead and systemctl disable the firewall D daemon. All right, so for now, those are the two things that I would do. If I minimize this terminal, I have my VirtualBox additions here. You can leave it if you want to, but what I would do is I would right click and I would eject this. So if I go down, there is an eject option. So I would go ahead and eject that. Now, let's reboot our system and test if everything is working. Now, in order to reboot, you can use one of many options. I can just go ahead and say reboot, or you can use init space 0, no, init space 6 for a reboot. Init space 0 actually shuts down the server for you. So let's go ahead and see. And then at this point, we would get the IP address, of course, which we know, and then try to see if maybe we can connect into this this server using any of our SSH tunneling tools, for example, PuTTY. But if you've been watching my videos, you know I have a preference for MobileXTEP. So let's wait for the server to start. All right, so I know the IP address. So we gave the IP address. No, I'm not going to sign in as admin. Let's go in as root. And I want to show you guys something. So root and then Oracle. And when it opens up, I would open up a terminal just to see. I would maximize this at this point because of the VirtualBox additions. I think our graphical interface might be a little bit more user-friendly. So I would right-click on this, open up a terminal, make this a little bit bigger for you to see. And then I will just type an ifconfig. So with an ifconfig now, I can certainly see my different terminals. So the first one, the ENP0S3, remember we assigned it, this is our host only. Remember we assigned it that IP address. So that is the IP address we are going to be using to go back and forth, what would be considered its public network. So I would go ahead and copy this. And these are the other network interfaces. The loop network is a 127.0.0.1. We are not going to be using that. So let's go ahead and open up our MobileXTEP and see if maybe we can establish a connection with this one. So let's go here. I would click on new session, and then I would want to establish an SSH session. And here I would paste that IP address that I copied, and I would specify the username as root. And then let's see if we are able to create a connection. And fair enough, we are able. Oracle would be the password. And then I hit enter. And voila. I think at this point, it is fair to say that we have successfully configured our Oracle Linux server 7.3. And I think all the network interfaces are good. But one last thing that I need for us to do, but because this is a RAC, there is a file called the etc hosts file. I would want for us to make some changes to the etc hosts file, right? I would copy all of this because when we eventually clone this VM, we are going to make sure that both VMs can talk together, and this kind of helps that process. So let's go ahead and copy, and I would VI to edit my etc hosts file. So currently you would see the loop address, the 127.0.0.1. I would switch to insert mode by using the I key on my keyboard. And I would go all the way down to the end. I can use my arrow, right arrow, or I can hit the end button on my keyboard. I hit enter, and then I would right click to paste. Now, maybe your mobile extends, you would have to right click and then go choose paste, whichever one works for you. But at this point, I just want to make sure that my entries, and you have to be very careful that all the entries in here are exactly the way they are supposed to be. So if you want to pause the video, take some time to look at these entries and make sure that you have corresponding entries that look the same. So escape colon WQ to save it. Now, to make sure that those changes have been are permanent, I will cut the contents of my Etsy hosts file. And fair enough, our Etsy host file is configured. So this would be the end of the first video of this series. We have successfully installed our Oracle Linux server, configured it with 3 network interfaces, and we are going to be ready to move on to the next steps. Remember when I showed you the plan in the beginning, we prepared the server with 3 network interfaces. So our next video is going to be on how to clone that VM and make sure that we configure the host name and network to be representative of a second node for our RAC system. Now, there is going to be an icon that pops up at the top right of this video. Subscribe to our channel. And certainly there's going to be another link on the top left of this video that's going to be pointing you to the video on how to clone a VM. Again, I want to thank you all for watching and stay tuned for the next video. Thank you.